It's absolutely true. That is my nature. I don't like the go hide in a cave and go build and come out later and figure out what's going on. I want to be um, close to the business reality. As a CEO, I'm very, very focused on financial metrics. I'm very proud to say we have a better than break even business right now. And in some circles, you don't want to admit it. Like, are you really investing enough in the growth of this business if you're break even? And my answer is yes.
Hello, I'm Adam Haney, and this is the Open Story podcast where I talk to technology leaders, builders, and visionaries about their projects and passions. Today I'm joined by Scott Downes, the CEO of Supernal, to talk about his journey from CTO to CEO. Scott, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, I know you and I have worked together for many years. I have been an engineering leader in your organizations and have also been able to see you build a bunch of really interesting things. But I'd love to kind of jump back all the way to the beginning because you have been building things for a while, and I'm always interested to kind of understand how do people get into this kind of space.
Well, I guess it all started for me at a very, very early age. I took some programming classes in some of these summer programs in elementary school. So I guess I was first writing code when I was around, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something like that.
Wow.
And this was many years ago. So
I won't
at,
ask what year, but yeah,
at
sure.
least 10 years ago, you know.
At least 10.
So yeah, at least 10. So yeah, I learned on uh, in a world that was sort of pre-personal computing. And my first languages were BASIC and then Pascal. So that maybe dates things a little bit.
Yeah,
Right. But yeah, so it was just to me, programming was just a cool mental game or puzzle, kind of like a crossword. Like it was entertainment. It wasn't work at all. And I certainly didn't think about a career path for it when I was 7 or 8. It was just the cool new hotness at the time. And yeah, so I started doing that. And by the time I got to high school, I kind of realized that this was becoming a meaningful discipline, this whole idea of writing code to do things, not just to play a high-low game at a command line. And I had a wonderful opportunity to make a little bit of money off of writing code when I was 14. The principal of my high school, who was also a great mentor for me, gave me the opportunity to get my first paid job of any sort, which was writing code for my high school and um, for report card generation and for managing schedules, which was a pretty cool project for me.
very cool. Yeah, it seems like we're still in an era where they haven't totally solved report cards or schedules, so maybe still an opportunity there.
Yeah, if I had to go back, maybe I would do it better. But yeah, it was just really cool to realize that the work that I do would be like literally in the hands of hundreds of students on pieces of paper. I don't know. There was a magic to that for me. So that's where it all started. But I'll say that, as you know, I kind of pushed hard away from that. By the time I went to college, I studied English and literature, and I really didn't think that. Um, Software development or programming was a career path. Just wasn't as exciting in that moment to me.
And after that though, you came back into technology. Like, what sort of facilitated that change for you?
Oh, the dot-com era definitely pulled a lot of us sort of liberal arts majors into the computing world. I know a few years after I graduated from college, I'd been working in all sorts of fields. I'd worked in radio. I was trying to make a living as a musician. And having a good time, but not making a lot of money. And about, I think it was 5 years after graduation, this was the late 90s, we had sort of a class reunion event. And I looked around the room, and all my friends who were English majors and theater majors, psychology majors, all of us had silly goatees and dot-com jobs. So that was just the way of the world at that point. With the internet boom, we all saw that having crossover skills was key. Not just wasn't just computer science majors. who were getting those jobs. It was the people who could um, could communicate effectively and who also had a little bit of that sort of tech skill on top of it. That was the magic formula for us.
Yeah, I don't know if we ever talked about this, but I started school as a journalism major, and then was my freshman year was the 2008 financial crisis, and so there was a little bit of soul searching around having cross functional skills, but I still think that being well rounded in that way helps me, as I'm sure it helps you. So kind of going into the .com era, was your first role was Bell South? Is that right?
Well, I did have a few jobs before that that might be of interest. Like I worked in desktop publishing and I built automation systems while also doing electronic typesetting or the desktop publishing of that era. And that was my first exposure to basically programming in a professional environment. And after that, I worked for a software company, a small startup that I was lucky enough to have some of the classic Macworld Expo experiences that existed in the 90s. So I went to a Macworld Expo and spent my time demoing a product that we sold on a shiny metal disc that was in a box at CompUSA, you know, that
Sure.
world of software development. And I was at Macworld Expo the year that Steve Jobs came back. I definitely caught the bug then of like what was exciting about the moment that we all were living in, of like the rise of the internet and the fall and return of Apple. There was a lot of kind of social, cultural drama around the technology world that was exciting to be part of.
Sure. How do you feel like, shipping, software on metal disks versus shipping software in the web app kind of sphere? Like, how did it change the culture of the place or the way that you guys approach building things?
Well, I mean, maybe it inspires a bit of carelessness. You want to get it right. You absolutely want to get it right when you know that you're going into a production run. You know, we talk about software going GM or Gold Master. It means a whole different thing when there's a literal like support burden associated with a version that may not be updatable without shipping update floppies, or just,
Yeah.
there's a whole different level of diligence associated with what a release means. And that probably has influenced me, especially as I am somewhat resistant to continuous release models. Probably there's some little part of my brain that's like, dude, we got to get it right. Like, what happens if this is in 500 CompUSAs and there's a bug?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think people that grew up in the era where we were shipping 3 or 4 times a day, there's a little bit too much of a YOLO mindset in terms of how things were built. Well, so then from there, you shifted gears and you came into sort of the telecom space. And I know there was a big part of your career that was related to the work at Bell South overall. What were your roles there, and what were you focusing on?
Well, yeah, I think I had enough experience with startups and kind of had the experience that I think we all have in startups of having your heart good and solidly broken. We had huge hopes for what we were going to be able to do at this early startup where I worked, and instead, I had my first formative experiences in watching great people get laid off and people getting, uh, their hearts broken and their lives changed by participating in the grand mission of a startup. And I think maybe I got a little cynical. I was definitely damaged enough to think, well, let me go find a big company. Let me go work in a place that has more stability and more of a commitment to, giving people opportunities over a long period of time. I, I'm sure I said at that point, never again will I work in a startup. Of course, that's like many things I've said, never again. Turns out it is again. But yeah, so when I worked at Bell South, our mission was to uh, make one of the world's first large scale intranets for a corporation. And this was in a time where people didn't, there was a lot of skepticism about giving internet access to employees at a company. People were afraid, managers were afraid that uh, if you give internet access, people would be playing, they'd be surfing the web instead of doing their
Interesting.
job. So the kind of the ongoing mission of my experience there from sort of a product side was to create the demand and deliver real business value with the technology products that we delivered over the web. So sort of like simultaneously, it was a motion towards legitimizing desktop internet for businesses, while also being able to ride that initial wave of moving from websites to web apps. There weren't really app servers
Yeah.
at that time. So yeah, it was a, I was there for almost a decade, and it was a really formative experience for me in terms of learning how to work with very business oriented clients and just riding that initial wave of the progress towards sort of in-tier web apps and a modern data driven web app architecture.
And
None
that's
of
when
none of
you,
which existed when I started.
well, in addition to the technology, like that's also the phase in your career where you started to switch into management, right?
Yeah, I always had a broader set of interests, or maybe a better way of saying it is that I hate relinquishing control. So pretty quickly you figure out that if your job is just to work a list, do tasks that are assigned to you, then you're going to end up in situations that are suboptimal for your well-being. So I saw that job pretty quickly as an opportunity to be sort of an internal consultant for Bell South, where I would provide technology solutions for different teams, and I would go in and do the kind of requirements definition and development. And it's just kind of that first experience where you realize that you're going to be happier if you control the content and timing of your work. So while I was writing code, what I was really learning at the same time was product management and design as central to the mission. Because if you're just writing code, you're not really in charge.
I think that's absolutely right. That's something that I learned in my career was that it was super important to understand the business context, understand how the work that you were doing move that business forward. And you continued to kind of lean into that, right? So like after Bell South, you took on sort of another, management role after that. Isn't that right?
Did I moved back to the startup world though. Um, I joined a company in Atlanta called AirWeb. And when I was leaving the Bell South world, a lot of people told me, like, you're an idiot. Like, you're going from an environment that's safe, kind of cushy, well compensated, to back to the world where of heartbreak and impossible business challenges, and that it would be a sweatshop. And so they told me, oh, I know that place. It's a sweatshop. Turned out they were right about everything, and I loved it. So yeah, it was a rebirth experience for me, of returning back to the urgency and craziness, the drama of startups. And yeah, at that point I realized that I'd been I'd been in denial all along, and I'm really a startup guy, that I'm addicted to that.
The never again only lasted for a little while, huh?
It lasted almost a decade, so it took me a while to learn my lesson. But yeah, I just immediately was caught up in the pace and the drama of the startup thing, and yeah, that was fantastic. Over the time I was there, we sort of like I joined at a point where we were at peak height, had a 20 million fundraise, $20 million fundraise, like the week after I landed. And immediately we went into scale up mode, hire a big team, go, go, go. And then, like any good roller coaster, there are some loops and some big ups and big downs. And we experienced pretty much all of those for the next big chunk of my life.
In the backdrop of all of this, I saw you sort of transition from individual contributor to managing engineers to managing larger teams throughout all of that. How do you feel like you were developing as a leader throughout all of that time?
Well, this was sort of my graduate school, for a lot of aspects of uh, of large scale software development, of the startup world. I just learned a ton through the positive and negative experiences of that. So we were acquired. We went through leadership transitions. We were acquired by a publicly traded company. That publicly traded company eventually was delisted from NASDAQ. There were bankruptcies. There were PE acquisitions. There was a ton of M&A. So I felt like I got like a sampling of all these different sorts of experiences. And for me, somewhat selfishly, like I felt like that was a great education in all the different twists and turns you can go through. And through those experiences, I was able to sort of go up the ladder. So I started off as an engineer who was responsible for front end applications at this small startup. But then through all the drama and changes, by the end of the line, I was managing a global team with product and engineering and design and in 7 cities on 3 continents. And I kind of like that was my ladder upwards in being able to see what it looked like to build technology at a large scale and to also build technology directly for sale. So my Bell South experience was about building internal tooling. And now I was in an environment where we were building during the great era of SaaS tools for enterprise. So people literally used our product. Our customers used our product. We weren't just an IT team. We were doing real product development that would drive the P&L. Like we were the source of revenue for the company, the success or failure of the product that we built.
You talked a lot about, the business impact of that work and sort of through the acquisitions. One of the things whenever, I mentor younger engineers that are sort of getting their first engineering manager job or they're moving from engineering manager to director that I talk to them about is, you know, going into those higher levels of, first team leadership and then departmental leadership. They're not promotions, they're different jobs. And a lot of times it's challenging to, you start to need to develop like what is your leadership style. And so I would think, through that process of leading on in 7 different cities and different continents overall, like how did you think about not just developing your business sense for direction, but also your either the tactical or interpersonal skills necessary in order to be able to lead teams? Like how did that kind of shape up for you? Any wisdom or at the very least maybe landmines to that you'd recommend people avoid?
Well, sure. I mean, I think I learned the way that I always learn through repeated painful failure. So I I think the biggest anti-pattern that I never escaped in that job was that I was still writing production code. I was still working on critical path work, even though I had dozens or 100 engineers. I still thought that my job as the technical leader in a company, as the senior most technical person in a global company, I still had a delusion about, as you say, like I thought I was promoted into being senior alpha geek, not to be a manager. And I think that even though I think I have good instincts as a leader, in some ways I was a great leader and a terrible manager, a really good engineer, but a bad uh, director of engineering. And the place where that really would manifest is in um, the intersection between the technology world and the rest of the company. So again, while I was the most senior person over engineering and product and even design at that company, it felt like a big gap. It felt like the communication issues and friction. I don't think I was a good partner as a business person. So I guess at the end of the day, what I realized through my failures there was that technology leaders have to be business leaders. You're an ambassador. You have to be as much of the business world as you are of the technology world, not just the best engineer. And I also learned that I needed to delegate and enable. I needed to build stars, not try to be a player coach ball hog. And all those lessons really were top of mind for me when I moved over to Bellhops at the end of that experience with the series of companies, AirWeb, VLT, Engage, et cetera. The other thing I would say is the experience of going from a VC darling to a distressed asset passed around among PE, like that also was a big influence on the way that I think.
I do think that there is an interesting question about the sort of capital stack for some of these different companies. But obviously, we all begin with our greatest ambitions. You were talking before about joining a startup where you really believed in the dream. It's a similar feeling when you join a VC darling that's really well capitalized. It sounds like it presented a lot of learning for you about how private equity might think about passing technology assets around. There's a dark side to that too. So I mean, like obviously it changes, the culture of a place and it changes a lot of the operational expectations. What was that, transition like as the company kind of went through its different stages of development and capitalization?
Honestly, I felt more comfortable in the hands of PE than VC and always have.
Really? That's
Oh
surprising.
yeah, I'm just a practical person. I like being running a profitable business. I like the constraints of capital efficiency. It just is more in my nature. And the experiences I've had where we were suddenly flush with cash after a fundraise, I've never felt more uncertain than in those moments. And I've had too many experiences of sort of, okay, double the team, and then 6 months later you're laying people off.
Yeah.
I'm just my nature is more towards small business creation than VC backed startup creation. That just feels more natural to me. So I think as much as it was, painful in some ways to crash against the rocks and have failure against these large expectations that you get in when you're in that moment of being a VC darling. I just definitely felt like I was more effective in a world where we were much more you know cautious about spending.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like all of those experiences have served you well as you think about transitioning into this CEO role at Supernal, where like you're not just falling into the traps that I sometimes see technical founders fall into, where they really go deep on just how am I going to build the technology, and I promise I'll come out of my cave, a year from now after everything's perfect. Like you're clearly, you know, for decades at this point. I mean, I know you're just 22, but like decades at
Right.
this point.
Since I was a 2 year old, yeah, it's absolutely true that is my nature. I don't like the go hide in a cave and go build and come out later and figure out what's going on. I want to be um, close to the business reality. As a CEO, I'm very very focused on financial metrics. Very proud to say um, we have a better than break even business right now, and that in some ways I'm in some circles you don't want to admit it, right? Like are you really investing enough in the growth of this business if you're break even? And my answer is yes. Like my goals are to simultaneously grow rapidly while also having sensible margins.
You've had all these different experiences, you've learned different things throughout, but when did you decide, hey, I'm ready to step from being in charge of technology to being the leader and the responsible party for the whole business?
Well, I think I've been in denial about that for at least 10 years. I was a CTO that ran marketing teams and design teams, dabbled in managing sales. And I thought that was maybe a fault or a defect of my attention or focus or something like it felt like a vice. It didn't feel like a virtue.
Interesting.
And well, I knew that I was capable of helping in other areas. I thought maybe it was holding me back, and my nature was always pulling me into a broader and broader role, and that's where my heart is. And even by the time I joined Invisible, there were periods of time at Invisible where I think there was a moment where I was overseeing finance as well as marketing, design, product, engineering. And it can be in some companies it's unusual for a CTO to even be over product. So it was always my nature to go broad, and it's always been my nature to avoid being put in a box. And I think it all just kind of clicked for me in the last few years that I should take my actions as an expression of hidden intention, right? Like my nature wasn't is not the enemy. The person that I am is who I am, and I should just like fully accept that and see that that's the natural path for me.
Now that you are, stepping into this role, I know, you have run most of the different kinds of departments in different stages in your career, but are there things that were surprising to you, or are there areas that you're finding you're really enjoying, now that you're in this new position?
One of the things that might surprise people is that I never have had, even in previous roles, but especially now, I don't have an ambition to create a really large company. I'm not an empire building type of person. I like things to be small, tight, and lean. I really think a lot about revenue per employee. And that's probably not a surprise because I'm by nature capital efficient. But yeah, the thing that I would say I fantasize about, the things that warm my heart are largely in the marketing space. So when I tell people like, what do I imagine? What do I fantasize about some number of years out or supernal or maybe not so many years, maybe months away. But I fantasize about Super Bowl commercial. I fantasize about storytelling, relevance to the market overall, making an impact in the world. I don't fantasize about having a large tech team or some particular technology innovation or writing a white paper. The thing that I am drawn to is storytelling, and specifically in the form of marketing and design.
Well, that seems like a great segue because I realize now we've been talking about Supernal, but we haven't talked much about what Supernal is or what it does. So this might be a great time to talk about that positioning work that you've been doing. Like, tell us a little bit more, like what is Supernal kind of focused on?
Oh, the way we tell the story today is that we hope that we can help to make AI relevant for SMBs. And the way we tell the story is we say, hire your first AI employee. So if you think about the challenge of small businesses and startups and trying to incorporate AI into what they do every day, into their operations, there are several challenges that you run into immediately. One is that a lot of small companies don't have the muscle or DNA for actual software development. So while we're in this moment where AI is super hot and people are really excited about the possibilities of how it can impact their business, a lot of small businesses are even less equipped to incorporate this sort of technological change than they were 5 years ago when the question was just like what SaaS platform to buy and what little custom things do we need to build. So it feels like an insurmountable hurdle in some cases, but an opportunity to lead to real magic. So I'm kind of giving you inside baseball on this, but what I would say is that if you if you're looking at a business problem, you're trying to scale up your business, you're trying to grow faster. When you think about what you might do in that moment, you think, well, I might hire somebody, or you might hire an AI employee. You hire an AI employee, the difference between the way that we approach this and the way that maybe a tech first company would approach it, we don't sell a platform. We don't leave the complexity of implementation up to our core customer. We build everything for you. So we have a services model. We come in, we say, okay, well, just like if you were hiring a human, when you hire an AI employee, we're going to write a job description. We're going to understand um, what skills you expect that AI employee to have and what it means to show up for work, what it means to have job responsibilities, what tasks do you have to perform, how do we judge success for that hire. So all this lines up for us in the form of delivering an AI agent in the right context that it can functionally replace an employee. So on a practical level, what that means is that we want your AI employee to meet you where you are. So that might mean a voice interface over a phone call, or an AI assistant that's available through Slack or Zoom or even an API. But in each of these cases, what we're doing is trying to think, well, where does real work get done for a business? And how does the AI employee go there rather than expecting people to take their business into a little box on a screen with a chatbot? So I'm walking you through each of the steps here. We think let's meet people where they are. And then with a human employee, as well as with an AI employee, we want to train them. We want them to understand your data, your business, your processes. And so that's what we do with our technology. We say, okay, if you have some proprietary data, let's take a practical example. Let's imagine you might think about hiring a marketing intern, but instead you're going to hire Supernal to provide that functionality. So you might say, my marketing intern, their focus is going to be on, let's say, creating social media content, a LinkedIn post every Friday. And what should that LinkedIn post be? What should it look like? Well, it needs to reflect our values, match our style guide, our language for how we speak. And maybe we should generate content that's based on an understanding of processes that we've been working on before or client case studies. So all that sort of training, you can imagine a human hire would have to go and talk to the team members and look through whatever systems we have of record to understand what work we perform. And in the modern world, that might be something like, on the AI side, it might be something like a RAG integration with a core set of documents. So you've got a knowledge agent now. But knowledge agents by themselves, even with the modern power of LLMs, are sort of BS artists. So what can they do meaningfully beyond just talking? So the next step is performing meaningful work. So when you think about the job responsibilities in a job description, you could imagine each of those as some sort of workflow. Those workflows can be executed on a platform. And that's what we do at Supernal. We build your common workflows into low code, no code process platforms. So now let's kind of assemble all the pieces that we have here. What if there was an AI agent that could meet you where you are, have natural language conversations, know all your data, perform all the work that you need? That's pretty compelling. Now, how do we know that it's doing a good job? Well, we manage the AI agent for you. You wouldn't hire a human employee without a manager. So why would you hire an AI employee without a manager? You put all these pieces together, those are that's the anatomy of an AI employee. And what you get at the end of the day is, through a managed service, without you having to understand the technology, you as a user of our service get a functional replacement for a human employee, and someone that can scale up 5, 10x or more compared to that human hire that you might have made. That's sort of the mechanics of it.
Obviously, to build effective agents like that, you need to have some intuition about the kinds of problems that different business leaders are going to have. And it strikes me that through all the M&A activity and through you working in technology for all these years, but also in all of these other places, that you are uniquely positioned to have an empathy for what that looks like. Do you find yourself drawing on those experiences in order to better intuit, how these agents are going to work, or how has that experience kind of helped you to shape areas of focus or areas of opportunity?
Well, definitely. It's you said the magic word, which is empathy. In the way that I frame like what we're doing, what are we trying to scale here? What we're trying to scale is empathy and education. Because fundamentally, there are two challenges with our buyers. One is that they typically have some evolved and complex understanding of their problem domain. Like, I don't go into a financial planner or an attorney's office and say, I'm going to tell you how your processes should work. And we don't follow that model of building vertically targeted agents that claim some level of expertise over a business. So it all starts with empathy. And what we're trying to scale with our engagement process is, on the one hand, empathy, which is to say, understanding where the business problems are and where the insight and business value is being created, and encoding that into processes that we can run. So that's sort of like a product management or requirement elicitation at scale. And the other piece is education. So we do have expertise. Our expertise is in delivering AI technology in small businesses. We've done quite a lot of it. We're doing more and more every day. And we know a lot about what works well and what doesn't. And when we think about that particular piece, we always say that we're surfing the waves of technology. We're not scuba diving. So we use what's best. We use the best technology that's out there. We're not committed to any one foundation model, to any one tech stack. We built our own platform to enable flexibility, so we can deploy the right technology for each person. So it's that back and forth pendulum swing of understand what the business needs while also influencing in spaces where they need to be influenced. Empathy and education and balance.
Obviously, you guys are targeting SMBs, and I know that they have unique challenges, and obviously, also your experience also overlaps a lot with the growth stage of those companies. But are there aspects of those companies that you think make them prime for AI adoption, or that you think make them the right opportunity for you to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, SMBs are really at the heart of innovation, and there's a tremendous opportunity to learn and grow, build up our muscles in that space. And frankly, it's just where my heart is. So I'm a natural supporter of the underdog. I love the little guy. Um, I'm on Team David, not Team Goliath, and I'm really passionate about supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, that's just where my heart is. And I see people like that, especially repeat founders who talk about growing a business and feeling like they lose control the larger it gets, that there's a move towards bureaucracy, that we face challenges like the innovator's dilemma, where companies, the more successful that they become, the narrower their ambitions are. I hate that feeling. I've been through that. I've been through that several times. And that sinking feeling of that sort of being kicked out of Eden feeling, the good old days were when we were small and lean and hungry and everybody was all in it together. That's what I want to preserve. I want to keep our customers in their own kind of personal Eden before the world has to intrude. And before you start to face the inevitable sort of laws of physics, the gravity of larger businesses.
I love that. I have also been involved in multiple startups that have gone through that kind of scale up journey. The running joke would be, remember when whatever was fun. And I think like preserving the length of time that you can be in Eden, I think is, a huge opportunity for technology, and a huge opportunity for people.
Well, and look at the macro conditions, and not to be too political about it exactly, but I do think that it's certainly been the case in my lifetime that we've fully moved from a world where you expect to get a job with IBM and work 50 years and get a gold watch. That ain't real. That hasn't been real
Hmm.
in a long, long time. So if you're expecting this sort of social contract where large businesses are protective of your interests, you're just barking up the wrong tree. The future of work is entrepreneurs. I believe the future of work is solopreneurs. I believe that what we're inevitably pointed to is a world where, as sort of, and not to be too nerdy about it, but we talk about cozy and friction and these sort of economic theories where I'm just very pro free market and I want to remove barriers between people and their ideas and helping one another. And that's what an economy should be about, is that mutual benefit, not sort of fetishizing the structures and institutions of corporations, which I honestly kind of hate.
Yeah. Well, another kind of unique decision you made is to build this company within Infinity, which is, a broader ecosystem of other startups that are helping to support each other. Can you talk a little bit about, how do you see that ecosystem helping Supernal? How has it been sort of building within that environment?
Yeah. Well, Infinity, I'm pretty biased because, I've been involved in the creation of Infinity. So when I decided that it was time for me to move on from working at Invisible and move out of the CTO role there, I took over as CTO of the Infinity constellation, where we were building a new framework, a new set of expectations around how you can grow small businesses, how you can enable startup growth. And I'm intentionally being very careful with my language because originally we talked about being an incubator, but we don't use that language now. We're thinking more about how we can provide a platform, both of people and services, to enable experienced founders to come in and add rocket fuel to their growth trajectory. And when I was working on that side, when I was fully focused on the Infinity side, I thought a lot about what the value prop is for founders coming into this world. And then as I've switched over to the other side of the table, I've been able to really benefit from some of those accelerants, those easy buttons that make it possible for me to keep my company focused on the core competencies, the values and missions that we want to think about, talk about, without being distracted by a lot of the things that sometimes can slow you down when you've just started a new business. So when we think about like how do I pay my team, back office functions, HR, finance, legal, Infinity provides a platform that allows me to focus on what matters for my business. But it also is a community of like minded people who are all chasing after similar missions. Sometimes it can be hard to quantify the exact benefit of being in a great founder community, but I know that with my heart, with my actions, with my mind, with my mental well-being, with my health, that being around a community of founders makes the journey much less lonely and much more achievable. And I feel like because so many of us have been through this kind of founding journey before and been with small startups, we know where it hurts. We
Hmm.
know we know where the pain is. Being able to be helpful to one another and to have easy buttons for the things that are a pain in the butt, but not necessarily unique to our business. Those are huge. I mean, I think for me, the proof's in the pudding. The reality is that we could not have grown the way we've grown over the last 6 months without Infinity being uh, a foundation for us. And if I start another company, it'll also be an Infinity because I just think that the model is superior.
That's really cool, and I feel like there are other Infinity companies as well that are doing really really well, but certainly Supernal is really knocking it out of the park as a part of the Infinity ecosystem. Well, Scott, I want to pivot a little bit more. We've gone through this journey together where we've talked about how did you get into technology, how did you get into leadership, how did you ultimately become the CEO of this company. Um, Looking back across that journey, like, are there philosophies or routines or practices, beliefs that you think have helped you all along the way? Are there things that, you think developed you into who you are now as a part of that journey?
Well, I'd probably answer that question differently every day of the week. But the thing that's really top of mind for me recently is thinking very consciously about resilience and personal well-being. Um, I've kind of treated, a lot of smart people think of their body as just some machine that carries their brain around, and a lot of people um, have a tendency to kind of ignore the signaling that they're getting from that helpful body about how they might be. Uh, their red flags they might be avoiding. So I've had some pretty intense burnout experiences that affected my own personal health multiple times over. And I got self-aware enough somewhere along the line that I even started doing burnout coaching. I helped to run a meditation center. I've thought a lot about personal well-being as a key part of the overall journey. And yet I've continued to run into those same problems where I just grind. I'm just too addicted to the grind. I love working hard, and I end up putting myself in these, um, painting myself into corners. And what I've learned most in the last several years, particularly the last 2 years, is how important it is to the term I use is the compound interest of good
Yeah.
decisions. So I've been benefiting from that compounding interest that if you're always underwater and behind, your body's gonna, as I said, the body keeps the score. You're gonna end up sinking. Um, Small decisions about maintaining proper boundaries, understanding what you're good at, understanding when to delegate responsibility, I feel like I've sort of started to see the matrix over the last few years, and I don't have to torture myself in the startup world. I can actually thrive even through failure. Uh, like that's another thing. I was a straight A student. I think it took me a long time to learn that I probably would have benefited from a few Fs. And it took me living my life trying to be a perfectionist, A student, and taking a few Fs, taking some failures in my life that I've learned to be not just welcoming of them, like to celebrate the learnings from them. And the nature of resilience is to when you see that failure coming, to immediately imagine all the wonderful things you're going to learn from it. And I can feel that programming is starting to take hold. Um, and I just feel that kind of confidence shifting in myself that rather than fearing the car crash and tensing up, I'm ready to go. Let's see what happens.
Well, let me ask this maybe a slightly different way, because I think resilience and sort of some of the practices in terms of taking care of yourself are important to everyone. Do you think that if you were talking to a technical leader that was considering a shift into a CEO seat or into a more business-oriented leadership position, uh, is there advice that you would give them? Are there, tools, techniques, frameworks that you would say this is something that they should study? In addition to above and beyond kind of resiliency and taking care of oneself, which I think obviously foundational. to being effective really in any role. But are there things that you think specifically, in that sort of technical to more broad leadership that you would, suggest to people?
Well, I would just assume. I mean, I don't assume that every individual contributor engineer who might be a rock star individual contributor needs to go on the path into management, or every CTO needs to eventually become a CEO. It's about knowing yourself, and that's can be surprisingly difficult, right? So we live in uh, we are all creatures of context, and I did have advice from a CEO I worked for many years ago who gave me a little heads up on this, and this has been almost 20 years ago. He said, Scott, I see where you're going here. You're going to keep rising the tech ladder, and your lifestyle needs are going to increase, and you're going to see that um, you can get to the next level and you get to the next level, but you're going to hit a ceiling if you don't improve your understanding of finance, of general management, and management skills. And I felt like that was super helpful for me to map out my own path. But that that reflected, like, he had a knowledge of me and my ambitions. He knew that I wasn't gonna like running into a ceiling. But for some people, that ambition is not what makes them happy, and they need to be able to be comfortable in who they are. And I'll say candidly, like, I think I'm a decent engineer, but I'm not an engineer's engineer. I'm not a fussy purist. I probably wouldn't be happy if all I did was write code. I'm very social. So for me, it's just been about learning who I am, and rejecting external labels and just owning my true identity and my true passions. So what I would say is that do what you want. Like, don't take a role because you think, like, don't go up the management ladder if you don't like management. Don't leave technology if what you love is technology. And this may sound silly, but like, I've spent my whole life, and I think a lot of us do, choosing career directions based on other people's expectations and other people's ideas of who you are. And I'm thankfully now trying to get past that. And I know who and what I am. And what I am is a devoted generalist. I love dabbling in lots of different areas. I'm a jack of all trades. And the role that I have today allows me to explore that. That's literally my job, is to go deep and spread around my interest in different areas. But I'll add on to that. I'll also say, specific to engineering leaders and uh, and people who are moving up those particular ladders, and this is echoing the point that you mentioned earlier. Um, you need to realize that management's a different job. So if you're going to go into this, you need to understand that the skill sets and values, and, like, the whole game changes when you're focused on uh, being a coach versus being a player. It's very different, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure that out. It took me the better part of 10 years to stop trying to write production code as a very senior leader. Like, that was silly. Now it's great to understand, but there's a danger of getting lost in the details.
Well, I think that that's a great place for us to end, Scott. I really appreciate you taking the time. If people want to learn more about you or about Supernal, where can they find you?
GetSupernal.ai is our website. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you want. That's Scott Downes, Downes. Find me, connect with me. Happy to talk more, especially with my brethren, my technical folks who are trying to figure out how to fit in this complex world and trying to find their way. Especially if you don't fit in any one particular box. Those are my people.
Well, Scott, thank you for taking the time. This was really fun.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Open Story Podcast. Each week we share interviews with technology leaders, founders, and visionaries to discuss their stories and what they're most excited about. If you're interested in being interviewed, please reach out to us on our website, openstorypodcast.com. For the latest episodes, you can subscribe in your favorite podcast app or visit the website, once again, at openstorypodcast.com.